They say the most dangerous moment of your life doesn't come with a warning. It comes suddenly. Flashing lights in the rearview mirror, a voice of authority barking commands, and a heart that skips a beat because you know this isn't just about the car you're driving. It's about who you are. And tonight, for one black woman, that moment was about to change everything. The night was calm. The streets quiet under the dim glow of streetlights. A sleek black car glided effortlessly down the road, its polished surface reflecting the city lights like a mirror. Inside sat Angela Carter, a brilliant attorney in her mid-30s, dressed sharply in a navy blue suit. Her hair was neatly tied. Back, her expression focused yet relaxed. She had just wrapped up a long day at court, one in which she had successfully defended an innocent man from wrongful conviction. Driving her brand new car, a vehicle she had bought after years of hard work, felt like a silent reward, a symbol of her perseverance. For Angela, every mile was a reminder of the battles she had fought, against poverty, against doubt, against every stereotype that had tried to box her in. But destiny had a cruel way of testing people at their peak. Without warning, red and blue lights exploded in her rearview mirror. The piercing sound of a siren cut through the stillness of the night. Angela's hands tightened around the steering wheel. Her heart raced. She glanced in the mirror. A police cruiser was on her tail, signaling her to pull over. Angela's mind started racing. Why am I being stopped? I wasn't speeding. I wasn't breaking any rules. She slowed down and carefully pulled her car to the side of the road. Her pulse thudded in her ears as the cruiser stopped right behind her. The driver's door of the police car swung open with force. Out stepped a tall white officer, his boots echoing against the pavement. His walk was heavy, his posture dominant, as though he was already certain of his authority. He placed one hand casually on the holster of his gun as he approached her. Vehicle. Angela rolled her window halfway down, her lawyer's instinct telling her to remain calm and cautious. "Good evening, officer," she said, her voice polite, steady. But his response was not polite, not steady. "License and registration," he snapped. Angela reached slowly toward her glove compartment, moving deliberately to show she wasn't hiding anything. She handed him her documents. He looked at them quickly, then at her, then back at the car. His eyes narrowed. "This car, it doesn't belong to you," he said coldly. Angela blinked, stunned. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," the officer continued, his tone sharp and accusing. "This car is too new, too expensive. Doesn't look like something you could own. Where did you get it? Did you steal it?" The words landed like a slap across her face. Angela's stomach tightened, but she forced herself to breathe evenly. She had spent years in courtrooms fighting cases of injustice, watching innocent people crushed under false assumptions. Now the same injustice was staring her in the face. "Officer," she said carefully, "this is my car. I bought it legally. The documents you're holding are proof of ownership." But the officer wasn't listening. His jaw clenched as he circled the car, inspecting every detail like a predator stalking prey. His flashlight beam swept across the polished hood, the leather seats, the shiny rims. Finally, he returned to her window, his eyes filled with suspicion rather than reason. "Lady, I've been on the force long enough to know when something doesn't add up," he sneered. "And this? This doesn't add up. You expect me to believe this car is yours?" Angela's hands curled into fists in her lap, but she kept her voice calm. "Yes, officer, because it is mine." The officer smirked, shaking his head. "Save it. People like you always have stories, but I don't buy them." Her chest tightened. "People like you." The phrase echoed in her mind. It wasn't about the car. It wasn't about the law. It was about her color, about her identity. Angela took a deep breath, reminding herself of the advice she had given so many of her clients in moments of injustice. Stay calm. Don't give them a reason to twist your words. Let them reveal who they really are. Still, her blood boiled beneath the surface. She wasn't just an ordinary woman. She wasn't just a driver on the road. She was one of the sharpest legal minds in the city, a defender of rights, a fighter for justice. And yet here she was, accused of being a thief, treated as if she had no worth, no dignity. The officer leaned closer to her window, his voice dropping to a threatening tone. "Step out." of the vehicle. Now. Angela's eyes locked onto his. For a split second, silence hung heavy between them. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down, the stares of passing strangers, the sting of humiliation already seeping into her soul. But deep inside, she knew one thing. This was only the beginning, because soon, very soon, the officer was going to discover who she really was, and that discovery would change everything. Angela stepped out of her car slowly, her heels clicking against the asphalt. The night air was cool, but her skin burned with humiliation. She felt the officer's eyes scanning her, not with professionalism, but with suspicion. Deep, baseless, and ugly. "Hands on the hood!" the officer barked, his flashlight now aimed directly at her. Angela clenched her jaw. Years of courtroom battles had taught her the power of silence, of patience. But this was different. Here she wasn't a lawyer commanding respect. She was a target, a woman stripped of dignity on the side of a lonely street. "Officer, I assure you, I haven't done anything wrong," she said firmly. "Quiet," he snapped, cutting her off. "I'll decide that." He positioned himself with authority, as though the shiny badge on his chest gave him the right to rewrite reality. Angela could hear the faint buzz of passing cars, the curious glances of drivers slowing down to watch. In their eyes, she was already guilty. The officer circled her car again, muttering under his breath. His boots crunched against the gravel, as he inspected the tires, the doors, even the VIN on the windshield. Then he turned back toward her, holding up her license with a smirk. "So, Angela Carter," he said, drawing out her name as if mocking it. "An attorney, huh?" Angela nodded, standing tall. "That's correct," he chuckled coldly. "You expect me to believe that? Driving a car like this? You could have printed this license at home for all I know. What's the real story here?" The accusation sliced through her composure. A wave of fury surged within her chest, but she swallowed it down, refusing to let him see her break. "This is my car," she repeated slowly. "The registration you're holding proves that. I don't know why you refuse to believe me." His face hardened, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Because I've seen your type before. You think you can cheat the system, bend the rules, and walk away clean. Not this time." Angela's stomach twisted. My type. There it was again, the poison hidden behind polite uniforms and official words. To him, her education, her title, and her hard work meant nothing. All he saw was her skin. The officer stepped closer, so close that Angela could smell the faint traces of coffee on his breath. He lowered his voice to a threatening whisper. "If you don't start telling me the truth, this night is going to end very badly for you." Angela stared straight back at him, her eyes steady. She refused to flinch, refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing fear. But inside, her pulse pounded like a drum. She had spent her entire life fighting injustice for others. She had cross-examined corrupt officers, dismantled false testimonies, and exposed lies in the courtroom. But she had never imagined standing on this side of the law, alone, vulnerable, accused of something she hadn't done. And yet she didn't reveal her identity fully. Not yet. Timing was everything. "Officer," she said carefully, "please listen to me. I have the paperwork. I have everything you need to confirm that this is my car. If you'll just—" "Enough!" he roared, his voice echoing down the empty street. He jabbed a finger at her. "Don't try to outsmart me. I know a liar when I see one." Her hands trembled slightly, but she quickly clasped them behind her back, masking the movement. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to lash out, to demand respect, to expose him for what he was. But Angela knew better. Sometimes the strongest weapon wasn't rage, it was restraint. The officer glanced at his radio, his thumb hovering over the call button. "Maybe I should get backup. Maybe you'd like to explain yourself to a whole team of officers." Angela's heart skipped. The thought of being surrounded, handcuffed, paraded like a criminal, it made her stomach turn. She had defended countless innocent people who had gone through that same humiliation, and now she was standing in their shoes. She took a slow breath. Not yet. Let him dig deeper. Let him build the case against himself. Do what you think is necessary, she replied, her voice calm but edged with steel. The officer blinked, taken aback by her composure. For a moment, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. but pride quickly smothered it. "You think this is a game?" he sneered. "You think standing there with your fancy words makes you untouchable? Trust me, lady, when I'm done, no judging. This city is going to save you." The irony twisted in Angela's chest like a blade. "If only you knew," she thought. "If only you knew who you were speaking to." She didn't move. She didn't argue. She let his words hang in the night air, poisonous and heavy. Cars continued to pass, drivers slowing down, their faces illuminated briefly by headlights as they craned their necks to see the scene. Some shook their heads and drove on. Others whispered, recording fragments of video from their phones. To them, she was just another suspect, just another story. But Angela knew this wasn't just another story. This was her truth, and soon it would be the officer's downfall. As the officer finally reached for the handcuffs at his belt, Angela's body tensed. The cold steel of injustice was about to close around her wrists, but deep inside, she was ready. Ready for the moment that would turn the tables. The night wasn't over. In fact, it had only just begun. The cold night air pressed heavily against Angela's skin as the officer tightened his grip on the handcuffs. The metallic clink of the steel echoed in her ears, each sound cutting deeper than the last. She had spent years defending others against unjust treatment, yet here she was, about to be paraded like a criminal for a crime she didn't commit. "Hands on the car!" the officer demanded again, his voice sharp and commanding. Angela hesitated. Her eyes shifted to the passing cars on the road. Headlights flickered, slowing down as drivers craned their necks to see what was happening. She could feel their stares burning into her, judging her, branding her guilty before even knowing her name. With quiet dignity, she turned and placed her hands on the hood of her car. The metal was cool beneath her palms, but her face burned, with humiliation. The officer leaned in, his flashlight grazing her back. "I knew it," he muttered under his breath, loud enough for her to hear. "Knew you were lying. Can't fool me." Angela closed her eyes for a moment. His words weren't just accusations, they were daggers. Every syllable was a reminder of the walls she had fought to break down her entire life. The long nights of study, the courtroom battles, the years of proving herself over and over. None of it mattered here, not to him. In his eyes, she was not an attorney. She was not an achiever. She was just a suspect. Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to remain silent. Silence was her shield. Silence was her weapon. The officer began searching her purse, her jacket pockets, and even the back seat of her car. His movements were harsh, careless, invasive. A few personal items fell onto the ground, a notebook, a pen, and her phone charger. They scattered across the pavement like broken pieces of her dignity. "Officer, there's no need—" She tried to speak. "Quiet!" he snapped, cutting her off again. "You'll speak when I ask you to." Her jaw tightened. She could feel anger rising inside her chest like a firestorm, but she swallowed it down. If she lost control now, he would win. A group of pedestrians had gathered across the street. Some stood with folded arms, watching silently. Others whispered to one another, their voices laced with curiosity and disbelief. One man pulled out his phone, recording. Angela noticed the small red light blinking. Her humiliation was not only unfolding in real time, but was also being captured forever. Every second felt like an eternity. The officer returned to her, holding up her wallet. He waved her identification card in her face. "So you say you're a lawyer, huh? That's what this is supposed to prove?" Angela's eyes flicked to the card, then back to him. "It's not supposed to prove anything. It does prove it." But he laughed. Laughed. "Lady, I've seen fake IDs better than this. You must think I'm stupid." Angela's heart sank, not because of his words, but because of the truth behind them. Nothing she said, nothing she showed would matter to him. He had already decided who she was. Her chest rose and fell with controlled breaths. Inside, though, she felt the weight of years crashing down. Memories of being underestimated, overlooked, and judged because of her race and gender replayed in her mind like a cruel montage. The voices of teachers who told her law was too ambitious. The colleagues who doubted her skills. The clients who looked surprised when she walked into the room as their attorney, and now this, an officer branding her a thief on a public street. Her humiliation was complete. The officer leaned closer, so close she could feel his breath on her cheek. "You're not fooling me. You may fool others, but not me. This car is stolen, and you're going down for it." Angela turned her head slowly, locking eyes with him. Her gaze was unshaken, her voice calm but laced with steel. "Be very sure of your words, officer, because when the truth comes out, it won't be me who's going down." For the first time, he hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second, his confidence faltered, but pride quickly returned and he sneered. "We'll see about that." He pulled out his radio, calling in what he described as a suspected vehicle theft. His words were sharp, rehearsed, dripping with authority. To anyone listening on the other end, she was already guilty. Angela's hands pressed harder against the hood of her car. She felt powerless, exposed, and yet strangely composed. She had been in battles before, different kinds of battles, but battles all the same, and she knew that sometimes you had to let the storm rage before you revealed your strength. The pedestrians whispered louder now. Some shook their heads in disapproval, while others smirked, enjoying the drama. Angela felt the sting of their stares, the silent verdicts being cast against her. Her humiliation wasn't just about this officer anymore. It was about every eye watching her, every stranger who would walk away with a story that wasn't true, but deep in her heart, she knew something they didn't. This wasn't the end. This was the moment before the tables turned. The metallic clink of the handcuffs in the officer's grip grew louder in Angela's ears, each sound a reminder of the humiliation she had already endured. She stood with her hands against the hood of her own car, her head slightly bowed, but her spirit unbroken. The officer's shadow loomed over her, tall and menacing under the flickering glow of the streetlight. His voice was colder now, dripping with certainty. "You're under suspicion of auto theft, and unless you start cooperating, I'll make sure this night gets a whole lot worse for you." Angela straightened, her back rigid, her palms flat against the cool metal of the car. Slowly, she turned her head to look at him, her eyes steady. "I have been cooperating," she said, her tone sharp but controlled. "You're the one refusing to see the truth." Her words only seemed to fuel his arrogance. He smirked, shaking his head. "The truth? Lady, I am the truth right now. And the truth is, you don't belong in this car. Not tonight, not ever." Angela's chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm, but beneath the surface, her blood boiled. Years of law school, courtroom battles, and tireless nights spent defending the innocent meant nothing to this man. To him, she was just a suspect, a stereotype in motion. The officer took a step closer, pulling the handcuffs from his belt. The metal gleamed in the dim light as he dangled them tauntingly in front of her. "See these?" he asked mockingly. "These are waiting for you. And once they're on, you're mine to take in. You'll sit in the back of my cruiser, and you'll get booked like every other criminal I've dealt with. Trust me, you won't be walking away from this." Angela swallowed hard. Her heart pounded against her ribs, but her eyes never left his. She wanted to scream, to demand justice, to reveal who she really was. But she didn't. Not yet. Timing mattered. If she revealed her hand too early, his arrogance wouldn't collapse. It would just double down. Instead, she whispered, "Are you sure about that?" The officer blinked, surprised at her composure. Most suspects he dealt with trembled, begged, cried, but she stood there, calm, steady, even defiant. It unsettled him, though he'd never admit it. "Yeah, I'm sure," he said, his voice low and threatening. "You think because you've got some papers and a fancy attitude, you can walk away from this? Not tonight. Tonight, you'll learn how the real world works." Her fists tightened at her sides, nails pressing into her palms. The real world, she thought bitterly. To him, the real world was one where power was abused, where judgment came before facts, and where prejudice masqueraded as authority. Her silence only irritated him further. He pressed the handcuffs against the hood of the car with a loud clank, the sound ringing like a final verdict. "Last chance," he warned. "Admit it. Admit you stole this car, and maybe I'll make things easier for you." Angela let out a short, humorless laugh. It startled him. "Admit to a crime I didn't." "Commit? That's your idea of justice?" His face darkened. "Don't test me." "I'm not testing you," she replied, her voice calm but powerful. "I'm telling you, you're about to make the biggest mistake of your career." The officer's grip on the cuffs tightened. His pride bristled at her words. How dare she speak to him like that? In his mind, authority flowed in one direction only, his. And yet, standing before him was a woman who refused to bow, who refused to break. The tension between them was thick, almost suffocating. A small crowd had gathered now, their murmurs filling the silence between exchanges. Phones were raised, capturing every moment. The officer seemed to notice, glancing briefly at the blinking red lights of recording devices. But rather than backing down, it only hardened his resolve. He wanted to show power. He wanted to show control. He stepped closer. So close, Angela could see the beads of sweat forming along his brow. "You don't seem to get it," he hissed. "I hold all the power here. You? You're nothing but a suspect. And suspects don't get to argue." Angela's eyes didn't waver. "Power built on lies doesn't last, officer. Truth always finds a way," he scoffed, shaking his head. "Spare me the speeches. When I'm done, you'll be sitting in a cell wondering how it all went wrong. And trust me, nobody will come running to save you. People like you never get saved." The words stung, but Angela didn't flinch. Instead, she felt something stir deep inside, a fire, a reminder of why she had chosen the path of justice in the first place. This wasn't just about her car. This wasn't just about one night. This was about every injustice she had ever fought against. And she knew. Her moment was coming. As the officer raised the cuffs, ready to bind her wrists, Angela stood tall, her voice steady and unyielding. "You're very sure of yourself," she said quietly. "But I promise you, before this night is over, you'll—" "Regret every word you've said." The officer froze for half a heartbeat, her confidence rattling him more than he wanted to admit. But then, with a sneer, he snapped back, "We'll see about that." And with that, the cold steel of injustice hovered just inches from her wrists, the line between humiliation and revelation growing thinner with every second. Angela knew. This was the breaking point. Soon, the tables would turn. The officer's hand hovered inches from Angela's wrists, the handcuffs gleaming under the streetlight. The crowd across the street grew larger, whispers floating like smoke through the night air. Phones were raised higher now, cameras capturing every humiliating second. To them, this was just another confrontation. But to Angela, this was a battle she could not lose. The coldness of the night pressed against her skin, yet she felt heat rising in her chest. A storm brewed inside her, a storm she had held back for too long. She had been calm, patient, deliberate. But now the moment had come. The officer's voice sliced through the silence. "This is your last chance. Say it. Admit this car isn't yours." Angela lifted her head slowly, her eyes locking onto his. Her voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made the crowd lean in. "Officer, you've made a grave mistake," he scoffed. "The only mistake here is thinking you could lie to me and get away with it." Angela didn't move. She didn't argue. Instead, she reached slowly toward her purse on the hood of the car. The officer stiffened, his hand flying to his holster. "Don't you dare!" But Angela's hand emerged, not with a weapon, not with anything threatening. Just a simple, shiny black card. She held it up between two fingers and extended it toward him. "Read it," she said evenly. The officer frowned, suspicious. Slowly, he snatched the card from her hand. He lifted it under his flashlight, his brows furrowing as he read the bold letters. State Bar Association. Official identification name, Angela Carter. Title, defense attorney. Licensed and active, the silence that followed was suffocating. The crowd leaned forward. A woman gasped. A man muttered, "Oh my God!" The officer's confident expression cracked. His jaw tightened, his eyes flicking from the card to Angela, then back again. His lips parted, but no words came out. Angela stepped closer, her presence commanding, her voice steady as stone. You accused me of stealing my own car. You humiliated me in front of strangers. You threatened me, tried to break me down, all because of your assumptions. And now you know exactly who I am." The officer swallowed hard, his fingers twitching, nervously against the edge of the card. He looked like a man who had just been stripped bare in front of an audience. His arrogance collapsed, replaced by a flicker of panic he couldn't mask. Angela's voice grew sharper, louder, cutting through the night. "I am not a criminal. I am not a thief. I am a licensed attorney in this city, someone who has spent her life upholding the very laws you swore to protect. And you? You profiled me. You tried to turn me into your story." The murmurs from the crowd grew into a low roar. Some people shook their heads in disgust. Others recorded more eagerly, knowing this moment was something no one would forget. The officer's face flushed crimson. He opened his mouth, searching for words, but none came. His authority had crumbled, and for the first time, he stood exposed, not as a figure of law, but as a man blinded by bias. Angela reached forward, plucking her card back from his trembling hand. She slid it into her wallet, her movements graceful, deliberate. Then she leaned in, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "You thought you had power over me, but power built on prejudice isn't power at all. It's weakness." The officer stepped back, his hands falling uselessly to his sides. He glanced nervously at the cameras, at the people, at the very reality he could no longer control. The silence stretched on, heavy and suffocating. Finally, Angela turned to face the crowd. She lifted her chin, her voice calm yet filled with strength. "This is why we fight for justice, because too often people are judged not by truth, but by assumptions. Tonight, you all witnessed it. Tonight, you all saw what prejudice looks like." The crowd erupted into murmurs of agreement, some even clapping softly. Phones captured her words, her composure, her dignity in the face of humiliation. The officer shifted uncomfortably, his badge suddenly feeling heavier on his chest. He wanted to disappear, to undo the last 30 minutes, but the damage was already done. Angela turned back to him one last time. Her eyes were steady, her words slow and deliberate. "You should be protecting people, not tearing them down. Remember this moment, because it won't be forgotten." The officer opened his mouth, again, but no sound came. He stood frozen, his authority stripped away, while Angela slid back into the driver's seat of her car. The engine purred to life. She rolled down the window, her gaze still locked on him. "This was never about the car," she said. "It was about who you chose to see when you looked at me." And with that, she pulled away from the curb, the luxury car gliding smoothly into the night. The crowd dispersed slowly, their conversations buzzing with shock and admiration. Some smiled, proud of her strength. Others shook their heads at the officer's shame. The officer remained rooted to the spot, staring at the road where her car had disappeared. The handcuffs dangled uselessly at his side, the weight of his failure crushing him. For the first time in his career, he realized the truth. He hadn't just confronted a driver. He had confronted a woman of unshakable resolve, someone who exposed his weakness without ever raising her voice, and that truth would haunt him far longer than this night ever would. The street was never truly quiet. Cars hummed in the distance. Leaves rustled in the soft wind, but in this moment it felt as though the world itself had gone still. Angela's words lingered in the air like thunder that refused to fade. The officer stood frozen, the handcuffs slack in his hand, his mouth slightly open, but unable to form words. The crowd that had gathered across the street whispered among themselves, their voices hushed yet electric. One woman shook her head. "Can you believe that? He was about to arrest her for driving her own car." Another man muttered, "And she's a lawyer. He messed with the wrong woman." The officer's face was pale, his arrogance stripped bare. He glanced around at the people recording him, their cameras capturing not his authority, but his shame. He looked smaller now, diminished, a man exposed in his own failure. Angela, meanwhile, remained composed. She stood tall, her expression calm, though her heart was still pounding from the confrontation. Inside, waves of anger, hurt, and relief collided, but she didn't let any of it show. She knew the importance of composure. She knew this moment wasn't just about her, it was about everyone watching. She turned slowly to face the crowd, her eyes sweeping across the faces illuminated by the glow of their phones. For a long moment, she said nothing. She let the silence itself speak. The crowd leaned in, expectant, waiting. Finally, her voice cut through the night, soft, yet commanding. Do you see how quickly a person can be judged? How easily assumptions can strip away dignity? The murmurs grew louder. A few people nodded, their expressions heavy with agreement. Angela's gaze shifted back to the officer. He avoided her. Eyes now, his shoulders tense, his pride collapsing under the weight of her words. You thought you had power over me, she said, her tone sharp but steady. But real power doesn't come from a badge or a uniform. It comes from truth. It comes from justice. And tonight, you chose neither. The officer's throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. His hands twitched at his sides, his body language screaming discomfort. He wanted to protest, to reclaim the control slipping through his fingers, but every camera pointed at him reminded him that the world was watching. Angela stepped closer, her heels clicking against the pavement. Each step echoed like a gavel striking wood. You humiliated me. You tried to turn me into a criminal in the eyes of strangers. And why? Because of what you assumed when you saw me behind the wheel of this car. You didn't see a lawyer. You didn't see a professional. You didn't see a woman who earned everything she has. You only saw your prejudice. The silence grew heavier, pressing down on everyone present. Even the wind seemed to hush. A teenager in the crowd whispered to his friend, "She's destroying him," without even yelling. Angela took another breath, steady and deliberate. Her voice softened, but its impact deepened. I've spent my life fighting for people who didn't have a voice, people who were accused, doubted, or disrespected. Tonight I was one of them, and I will not forget it. The officer's eyes flicked toward her briefly, then darted away. He looked down at the ground, ashamed, as though searching for an escape. That didn't exist. Angela turned back to the crowd once more. Remember what you saw here tonight. Because this isn't just about me. This is about how quickly assumptions can destroy lives. How prejudice can humiliate, harm, and silence good people. We must all do better. The crowd responded with quiet applause, hesitant at first, then growing louder. Some people clapped with conviction, others with tears in their eyes. Their applause wasn't just for Angela. It was for the truth she had spoken aloud. The officer shifted uncomfortably, his badge feeling heavier on his chest. He wanted the ground to swallow him whole. Each clap was like a nail sealing the coffin of his authority. Angela lowered her hands from her hips, her posture still regal, her composure unshaken. She walked toward her car, her movements slow and deliberate. The crowd parted slightly, creating a path for her. She opened the driver's door and paused, turning back one last time to face the man who had tried to strip her of her dignity. Her words were quiet, but they cut deeper than any shout ever could. You wanted silence from me tonight. Now you have it. But remember, silence doesn't mean defeat. Silence means the truth has already spoken louder than you ever could. The officer stood frozen, unable to respond, his silence now deafening. Angela slid into the driver's seat, her hand steady on the wheel. She started the engine, the soft purr filling the night air. For a moment, she simply sat there, letting the silence linger, letting the officer drown in it. Then, without another word, she pulled away from the curb. The luxury car rolled down the street, its taillights glowing red as it disappeared into the darkness. The crowd slowly dispersed, their voices buzzing with excitement, outrage, and admiration. Some replayed the videos they had captured, others shook their heads in disbelief. But one thing was certain. This night would not be forgotten. Back. On the sidewalk, the officer remained rooted in place, his shoulders heavy, his pride shattered. The silence around him was no longer peaceful. It was crushing, and for the first time in his career, he realized that silence could be louder than any siren, any command, any voice of authority, because in that silence, he had been defeated. The road stretched out before Angela, smooth and endless, but her thoughts were anything but calm. The city lights blurred past, their glow painting streaks on her windshield as she drove deeper into the night. Her fingers gripped the steering wheel, tightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what had just happened. For most people, tonight would be just another viral clip. By morning, the internet would buzz with hashtags, comments, debates, and outrage. People would dissect the video frame by frame, pointing out the arrogance in the officer's stance, the calm steel in Angela's words, the gasp of the crowd when she revealed who she was. But for Angela, it was more than a viral moment. It was personal. She thought about the young girl she once was, the child who had walked to school past neighborhoods where people looked at her as though she didn't belong. She remembered the teachers who doubted her, the employers who questioned her qualifications, the strangers who looked at her success and assumed it must have come from someone else. And now, even after years of building her career, defending, the voiceless, fighting in courtrooms, and proving herself over and over again, she had been reduced, once more, to a suspect, a stereotype, a thief in the eyes of a man with a badge. Her chest tightened. Not from sadness, but from a deep, burning determination. This cannot keep happening, she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. By the time Angela reached her home, her mind had already decided. She would not let the night end as just another painful memory. She would turn it into something larger, something unshakable. She stepped into her living room, the quiet space greeting her with stillness. She set her keys on the table and pulled out her phone. Notifications flooded the screen, missed calls. From friends, messages from colleagues, countless tags from social media. The video was already spreading faster than she had imagined. Angela hesitated only for a moment, then tapped record. Her face filled the screen. Her voice was calm, steady, but carried the fire of conviction. To everyone watching this, she began, I need you to understand what happened tonight. I was stopped, accused, and nearly arrested for driving my own car. Why? Because of what someone assumed when they looked at me. She paused, her eyes unwavering as she stared into the lens. This is not just my story. This is the story of countless men and women who are judged every day. By the color of their skin, by their gender, by the assumptions people make before knowing the truth. Tonight it happened to me, but tomorrow it could be you, or your daughter, or your son. Her words carried a rhythm, not rehearsed, but born from years of silent endurance. The officer didn't see a lawyer. He didn't see the hard work, the years of study, the late nights I spent fighting for justice. He didn't see a woman who earned everything she has. He only saw what he wanted to see. And that is the very definition of prejudice. Angela's voice grew stronger, each word cutting like a blade. We cannot stay silent, because silence allows these moments to repeat themselves. We must hold people accountable. We must demand fairness. We must remind the world that dignity belongs to everyone, regardless of appearance, background, or identity. Her eyes softened, her voice dropping to a near whisper. I stayed calm tonight because I knew losing control would mean losing more than just an argument. But understand this. Staying calm does not mean accepting injustice. It means choosing a different kind of strength. And strength, when rooted in truth, is impossible to break. Angela ended the recording with a steady hand, then uploaded it. With one simple caption, power built on prejudice is not power at all. Justice matters. By morning, the video had reached millions. News outlets replayed the confrontation. Commentator analyzed her words. Strangers across the world praised her composure, her courage, her ability to remain unshaken in the face of humiliation. The officer's silence became a symbol of defeat, while Angela's voice became a beacon of strength. In classrooms, teachers showed the video to spark conversations about prejudice. On social media, young girls shared her clip, saying, "This is who I want to be." Communities that had long felt ignored found hope in her defiance. But for Angela, the most meaningful messages came quietly. Emails and letters from ordinary people. One was from a mother who wrote, "My son was stopped last year for walking home from school. He came home in tears. When he saw your video, he said, She's fighting for me. Thank you. Another came from a young law student. I doubted whether there was a place for someone like me in the legal world. After watching you, I know I belong here. Angela read each message carefully, her heart heavy yet filled with purpose. She realized that what had begun as humiliation on a dark street had transformed into something larger than herself. She had turned pain into power. Weeks later, Angela stood on a stage at a community event, facing hundreds of people who had come to hear her speak. The air buzzed with anticipation. She adjusted the microphone, her eyes sweeping across the crowd. What happened to me was not unique, she began. But what we do with these moments, that is what defines us. She told them about the silence on that street, about the crowd's watchful eyes, about the officer's shame. She told them how silence, though painful, can speak louder than any voice when truth stands behind it. And then she gave them the lesson that had crystallized in her heart. Dignity, she said firmly, is not something anyone can take from you. People will try. They will doubt you, humiliate you, and reduce you. But dignity is yours, and it cannot be stolen unless you surrender it. Power rooted in injustice will always crumble, but dignity rooted in truth will always rise. The audience erupted into applause, not out of politeness, but out of a shared understanding. They weren't just clapping for Angela, they were clapping for themselves, for every silent moment they had endured, for every injustice they had faced. Angela smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She knew the road ahead was long. There would be more battles, more prejudice, more moments where silence tried to crush voices. But she also knew something else. She was not alone anymore. Her story had become their story, and their silence had become a roar. That night, when Angela returned home and stood before her mirror, she saw not just a lawyer, not just a woman who had survived humiliation. She saw a fighter, a leader, a symbol. And for the first time in a long time, she whispered to herself words that felt unshakably true. They tried to take my dignity. Instead, I showed them what dignity really is. If you enjoy these stories, make sure to subscribe to Black Battlers so you never miss the next one. Your subscription gives us the power to bring you even more emotional and inspiring stories. Join the Black Battlers family today.